I'm going to talk about Jacob's dream this morning. It's actually a very, very well-known passage, but I do believe I've got a message for us as a community, and I hope that it will be uplifting and edifying to you. We're going to, sorry, I'm giggling because every time I look up, every Sunday I see Genesis. It's already May and we're still stuck in Genesis, and there's still a whole bunch of other books we need to get to, but it's so deep and rich. We're just going to take a moment and read about this. Genesis chapter 28, verse 16. And it says the following: Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Verse 17. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. This is him speaking after he had his dream. Verse 18. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. Verse 19. He called the name of the place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first. 20. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, verse 21, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. Verse 22, the last verse. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. No, it's not a money conversation this morning. I want to just give you a very quick recap on where we've built up to this place this morning. So last week we spoke about this concept about sometimes the issue is not specifically rejecting God. Sometimes we don't value God enough. And it was, you can go to the next one. It was this challenge between value versus neglect. And sometimes we confuse it too. It's not that we specifically reject God. It's sometimes that we don't value our relationship with Him enough. And so we don't prioritize Him. And so what happens is, over time, when you neglect your relationship with God enough, you feel distant, you feel you can't connect, and you rely on other people around you in order. And I'm not saying it's wrong that other people pray for you, not at all. Laying in on of hands and praying together as a community, that's important. But where the challenge is, because we neglect our relationship with God, we become dependent on other people to build on their relationship with God so that we can have one with Him. And that is completely unhealthy. So it's not that people reject God, it's that they don't put Him first in their lives. And the problem with that idea is that our lives are shaped more by what we value than what we have been given. And that becomes problematic in our lives, because without us realizing, our relationship with God eroded over a while. And so I'm going to show you today, as we're going to speak about Jacob and his dream, I want you to take this idea of neglect and value and draw this into the story, because we find Jacob in a position where, even though he valued the promise, he finds him in a position of isolation because he neglected some things in his life. But God still blesses him. You see, God's promises move throughout generations. I want you to understand this concept. God's promises moves throughout generations. And this becomes challenging and it becomes uncomfortable for all of us for one simple reason. Because we want the dopamine hit. Can I explain it to you this way? You see, I was that type of guy. My sister, she loves building puzzles. I don't like building puzzles. But I like doing one thing. I like finishing the puzzle. Okay. You guys know what I'm talking about, okay? I don't do the sorting out part. No. I might be committed to building the edges. There's something satisfying about completing that square or rectangle. But then I hand it over to her. And you know what's satisfying? If she's in the last 5% and those the last 5 pieces left, and you kind of bully her away from those last pieces, and you take the last one and you put it in the picture he's got. You know, guys know what I'm talking about, right? And that's what I mean by the dopamine hit. We all want that finish line aspect. We all want to complete the story. But sometimes the challenge is we aren't always in the position where we get to complete a story. Not always. And sometimes God has got a plan for our families that extends beyond our lifetime. And that makes us a little bit uncomfortable because we want to put in that final piece of the puzzle. But we don't always get to do that. And so I want to talk to you about this idea about the dream that outlives us. And so it's going to be a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation, but it's a mature conversation. So I need you to take a deep breath and hear my heart in this conversation. You see, this has been repeated a couple of times. Some receive the promise. Some preserve the promise. And then you have those lucky people that gets to build the promise as well. And that's the fun part. But many times we don't see ourselves in that position. We see ourselves in a receiving the promise or persevering through the promise. Now, let me just give you a little bit of context to the conversation of Jacob. You see, in the story of let me just rephrase quickly. If you don't know where I'm referring to Jacob running away. Him and his brother fought about some soup. You need to listen to last week's message to understand where that is coming from. And now he finds him in a position where he's isolated, he's alone, and he needs to fend for himself, but that's difficult. And he finds himself laying down on a stone, and he receives this dream about heaven touching earth and God speaking directly to him. And so that's the context of the dream that we are referring to. But in this case, I want you to understand that Jacob is running. He has an uncertain future. And the last one, and this is also important, is he's not yet transformed. He's in a position of brokenness. And here's the mind-blowing part, the mind-blowing aspect. And I want you to grab hold of this. Is that Jacob was carrying a promise he didn't fully understand. God can call you and He can speak to you and you can have significance, but you might not understand that fully and you might not even be aware of the significance. Can I use a very simple illustration? For example, let's say you get this big block of metal as a gift from your grandfather, and it's just a big block of metal and it's all broken and it doesn't mean anything, and you use it as a door stopper. But later on in your life, you found out that that piece of metal was something your grandfather used in the war, and it protected his life. The bullet holes that you see in that piece of metal was actually bullets that was meant for him, but that piece of metal protected him from those bullets. And suddenly, something which we see as just a door stopper, when you realize the significance of the promise, it gets value and it changes your life. It's the same piece that you had by the door the whole time, but because you understand what it means, then suddenly it's got impact in your life. And I've got a feeling many of us, that's how we treat God. We don't understand the promises enough in our lives, and so you live with this idea of God, but He doesn't change your life because you don't understand the significance. Is that making sense? In this idea, yes, you can stay on this one. In this idea where he receives a promise but he doesn't fully understand it, that's where God meets him. And this is significant because sometimes we wait to be good for God to meet us. Sometimes we wait to be perfect for God to meet us. But God meets us where we are in the condition that we are in. And in that condition of not being fully transformed, he received this divine dream from heaven. And the dream refers to this, this stairway or this ladder. The next one, it's this idea of heaven being connected to earth. And the next one, and he sees angels ascending and descending. And when we go to Sunday school, there's a lot of emphasis placed on this dream. But as adults, I want to take us a little bit, a step further and deeper, to reveal the significance of this. In Genesis 28 verse 15 it says, "Behold, I am with you and I will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." See, for us, it's nice hearing those things, but you need to understand something. and this happens to all of us, is that Jacob receives a future before he has stability. You receive a dream many times before you have the significance. You receive the desire before you have the reality thereof. And this makes us all uncomfortable, each one of us uncomfortable, because God calls us and we aren't equipped yet. And we know this. And so for some reason, and when I say some reason, it's not illogical. It's just that we doubt ourselves in so many occasions. We doubt that we really heard God's voice. But in so many occasions, we are called out and we have been assigned, but we're not willing to take up the responsibility of that calling. And so your promise that you receive can never be fulfilled in your life because you're not willing to step up to the requirements of the promise. You guys are quiet, and I hope this is not offensive to you, okay? And so we are challenged with this idea that God sometimes gives us something in our future, and we struggle to see that because we're looking at where we are now. But God sees something different in each one of us. You see, He's not looking at your current position. He's looking at your future potential where you can grow into, where you can develop into. And so we make the mistake of thinking that the present is permanent. And it's not. How can your present be permanent if God enters your story? Because when God enters the story, your future changes. If you allow Him to discipline you, if you allow Him to mold you, and if you allow Him to hold you accountable. Can I say this again? He receives a future from God without a home. He doesn't even have a home, but God gives him a promise. There's no certainty in his story, but God gives him a promise. Here's the worst part of it all. There's no plan. There's nothing, but yet we find that he receives a promise. And I struggled to this up until to this time in my life. It's something, because I've been... I think my gifting area, I've got vision, I've got goals. I think I'm task orientated. Oh, I can be people orientated as well. But I can be my wife calls it stubbornness, but I just call it goal orientated. So when I want to go somewhere, I want to go somewhere, and that's the end of it. But the problem is sometimes I do feel God points us into a direction, and I get overwhelmed. It's beautiful, it's nice. But then I look at this journey and I think, how on earth? How are we going to get there? I can't walk that far. I get tired. My shoulders aren't big enough to carry this burden. But in reality, what's taking place is that God always gives us. I mean, if you think about Joseph as well. He gives this end story, but there's all these tension that happens on the way there. And so sometimes we are not ready for everything in our life. And so we step back from something greater that God has in store for each one of us. Why? Because we don't want to be held accountable. Neither do I. We don't want to be molded. We don't want to change to fit into this direction where God is leading us. But Jacob comes to a place where in his brokenness, in his nothingness, he's got nothing to offer. And God promises him a future. Genesis 28 verse 16. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Next verse. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. You see, he responds to this experience, but then he does something important. I want you to pick up on this. He experiences something, but the important part comes just after he receives this promise. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put up under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on the top of it. Next one for me, please. And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. He receives a promise, and immediately after this promise, he takes something tangible. I want you to pick up on this, and this is the key. And I know you know this, but I'm going to remind you of this. Jacob builds something physical to remember something spiritual. I want to show this to you quickly. Okay. Small little book. Okay. Now this is, when you see this lying somewhere, it won't mean anything to you, okay? And I'm not going to show you the picture, okay? But I'm just going to open this up. And this has been given to me in June 2020. And the first picture I see is my 3 beautiful kids when they were well behaved, they listened, and everything was perfect in life, okay? Then I see a picture of my face immediately after that. And I am moody and angry and frustrated because my wife forced me to take pictures of me, and I didn't know why she was taking pictures of me. Can I explain something to you? My wife and my kids gave me this as a gift. We were having fun in the car reading about the quotes and stuff on our way to church. You see, we've got a tendency to take the invisible emotions that we experience, and we love expressing them in physical form in order to show what we feel. Okay? If you guys don't believe me, how many special stones do you guys have at your home that you went on a walk, you saw something, it looks like a heart, and you pick it up and you give it to someone you care about? It doesn't look like a heart, but to you it looks like a heart. And you keep that stone, you give it to, sometimes you put a nice ribbon on it, and it's a very cheap way to show affection. It works. And so but the thing about that, we do this with a rose or whatever the case may be. You're trying to take something on the inside which other people can't see, which they can't experience, and you're trying to manifest it in something physical, and then you hand it over to someone that you care about. This is what this represents. It's something physical and tangible that represents something that's hidden away in the heart, which other people can't always quickly see and observe. And so Jacob does this. He does this in the scene where he experiences something spiritual, but it's important for him to manifest what he experienced in the spiritual to make sure that there is something that highlights the significance of this in the physical. It becomes important. It becomes important because he wants to commemorate something that he experienced on the inside. And we do that even until this time. But here's the beauty of this, that this was not the only time when God did something like this, where God gave a dream. This was not the only time when God spoke to someone and they experienced something and they tried to make a physical manifestation. Now, manifestation can sound like a very bad word. It's not a bad word. I'm trying to express you are giving form to something that you experienced here. Can I remind you of another moment which you guys experience every single Sunday? When God moved and spoke to Jacob and he planted a stone. Guess what if I told you something? What if I told you that we are seated within a specific moment? We are seated inside a stone today that was a manifestation of something that happened in the spiritual. Let me explain this to you. I call it the 1976 moment at the back in the front of the church behind that green pot plant, fake plant by the way, but takes less water. Anyways, there's this cornerstone that refers back to this 1976 moment when this church doors were opened for the first time. I want you to understand something which is significant. What we sit in today was once someone else's dream that they had. I want that to sink in for a second. That as Jacob experienced something and he took the effort to plant something physical, this community where we are seated right now is filled with memories where God showed up in such significant ways that a community of members, which many of us don't even know anymore, some of them aren't even alive anymore, but they experienced something in the spiritual, and it was non-negotiable. They had to put down a landmark right here where we are seated right now to remind future generations of something significant. It's to remind future generations that God was here. The same way that Jacob did it. And this, what I'm explaining to you is not unique to Baruch Church. This is every single church's story where God showed up, they had a spiritual encounter, and then it was non-negotiable. We need to show the community what is happening here. And not too long ago, there was another dream. And I had the privilege to be involved in this dream. I was involved, and when I say involved, I was an observer. It has nothing to do with me. I was just observing. There was a 1976 moment, but there was a 2007 moment as well. And I can remember my dad coming forward and saying, "Hi, we've got these beautiful plans. We've got this beautiful vision. This is what it looked like, and we're going to do something significant for God." And I can remember looking at my dad and not caring much, because I just bought a PSP and I was playing Need for Speed Most Wanted. True story, even at the earphones. Any case, it didn't matter much to me at that moment, in that single moment, because I was focused on other things. But as time went on, I saw the significance of this vision of 2007. The reality and the sad thing about this whole story is that although my dad, he saw it, he never got to build it. And some people would label that as unsuccessful. Some people would label that as a lack of vision. Some people would label that as a lack of commitment. But can I share this with you? Can I share this with you that when God reveals something, it's not for a specific generation. When God reveals something, it's for His plan that progresses beyond us. And I want to ask us this question. Are we able to handle that information that God gives us gifts that's not supposed to benefit us? Let me rephrase that. It can benefit you, but God has given you a gift. He's given you a calling. He's given you special abilities. But with this one single idea, you receive something so that you can use it to be a blessing to someone else. So my dad received something which he thought was, not in a negative sense, which he thought was something that he was responsible for, but he had one assignment, and that was to preserve what God has spoken to him from one generation to the next. And so he saw something, but he never got to build it. But then we came along. Over the last couple of years since then, we've experienced severe obstacles. You can go to the next one for me. And heavy delays. But this becomes a significant moment for me because what I'm having in my hand right now is the approval of the building plans that my dad saw in 2007. You see, my dad saw something, but he never got that signature. And I don't know if he felt not good enough, and I don't know if he felt his leadership was lacking, but in reality, when you zoom out on this picture, is that God is not just building something now. God is not just going to move now. He moved in Jacob's time. He moved in the 1976 moment. He moved in 2007. And I want to assure you that He's still moving in 2026 up until this time. Because God's move, it doesn't stop with us, ladies and gentlemen. God's got a plan for our children and their children after them. And God moves throughout generations. And the question is, the question is, are we able to handle that? You know, and I understand people's got opinions about church buildings and things like that, but can I just this is just my perspective. When Jacob saw heaven touching earth, he built a reminder that God was there. It was non-negotiable for Jacob. That's the first thing he did. He took stones that were flat and he made sure that one stood upright, so that whenever his children walks past that upright monument, it will be a reminder that God met with my father. God met with my grandfather. God is meeting with us up until this stage. And then the challenge comes to this place whether we can play our part. Because I want you to understand something about our church. Baruch Church is the marker that reminds this community that God is here. I had Opa W in our house yesterday. Okay. Opa W is very old. Okay. Sometimes, I won't name any names, but some children make jokes that he's so old, he was born 5 minutes before Noah. But every time Opa W walks in there, he's moved by the memory of this building. Because he recalls that moment when he walked into this building and God's presence was tangible. He recalled that morning, the moments when he prayed for someone and someone gave their heart to God. He recalls that moment when a song was sung and there was no preaching taking place because it was just worship and God was moving from the beginning to the end. He recalls a time, and so every time he walks and he engages with us, this becomes a monument of the moments where God moved significantly in his life. And he doesn't even attend this church. But he can't help it. En Opa W, ons het gehoor. Elke keer Opa W, we hear the same stories over and over and over again. But the reason for that is because the altar that has been built, this building, this ordinary bricks and ordinary paint and ordinary things, it represents a movement on the inside of his spirit that reminds him that God was there, that God is moving. So the reality is this, that no single generation completes the promise. No single generation completes the promise. Because Abraham received it, Isaac preserved it, and Jacob encountered it. And then guess what happened afterwards? Generations witnessed it. The moment of Jacob was so significant that thousands of years later, we are still referring back to his encounter with God, because a monument was erected and put in place to remind every single believer on when God moved. So the challenge that we are faced with is this. The question is never whether God is faithful. The real question is whether we are willing to play our part in what he is doing. This is where it becomes challenging. Because sometimes God inspires you to pray for someone, but you don't. Because we're scared. Sometimes God places someone on your journey which you need to minister to, but we don't. Sometimes God gives a vision, but we don't show commitment. Sometimes God gives a calling and we don't respond. It's not that God has stopped moving. The question is if we are obedient to what he is trying to do in our lives. And so this becomes a very personal conversation. Because to me, what we build today will preach long after we are gone. Maybe this is just me. Maybe it might just be me. But I've got this deep desire in my heart to leave something behind that doesn't only serve this community today, but I've got a desire that my life and the work that we do speaks beyond our lifetime. I've got this thing with sustainability. I've got this thing with productivity. This is free therapy for me. I don't like gardening, okay? I don't like gardening, not at all. but I've got something for a plant that produces something. I can't help this. I have chili plants, I have jalapeno plants, I have tomato plants, I have basil, I have, that's it. Okay. I can't get myself to go out and do gardening, but there's something beautiful to me when there's something in the garden that I'm taking care of. But I don't have to replant it every second week, okay? What happens is I'm investing into something. Yes, some people laughing because they need to buy new plants every second week. They're sitting in this corner over here, okay? I've got this thing about putting in work, putting in effort for something that consistently produces over a period of time. And what I want to be careful of is building a generation that can only serve itself. This is just for me. I want to be careful of building something where we enjoy church. I want to be careful of building something that this was fun for us. I want to build something that is sustainable beyond our lifetime so it can bear fruit in the lives of others. So that they can learn the lessons, they can understand the mistakes, but we can add value on which the next generation can stand on. You see, someone dreamed it and someone carried it, but now it's our time to build it. See, Jacob had a stone, but we were blessed with a plan. It's on the next slide. But both of those things is saying one simple thing, that God is here. I'm going to invite Pastor Patrick and your team to join me at the communion table. And I want to give you an opportunity, if you would allow me to ask you just to bow your heads and close your eyes as we move into a time of reflection. The communion table which we celebrate, it becomes an altar, it becomes a monument, it becomes a reminder of what has been done for us many years ago. And I want to invite you together as a community, as we're going to share this together, as the bread represents the broken body of Jesus on the cross, and the grape juice represents the blood that flowed for each one of us. It's symbolic on what was done for us, because God loved us so much that while we were sinners, while the promise wasn't fulfilled, while we weren't part of the family, while we weren't transformed yet, that God loved us so much that in our weakest position, He had one desire, and that is to give us the opportunity to be reconciled to. I'm going to invite our team to please share communion with everyone. I'm going to ask you kindly, please just hold on to your communion wine and the bread. Yes, you're welcome to share so long. And I want us just to pray together before we're going to use this together as a community. Just going to give a moment. While they are sharing, I want to just ask, please, I just want to greet the online community. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Just giving it a moment so everyone's got the communion ready as we're going to pray and use that together. Father, what a blessing it is to gather as a community and just commemorate what you have done for us in our lives. Thank you for the sacrifice of your Son. Thank you for the price that has been paid for us. Today we are reminded of your goodness, and your mercy and your grace. We are reminded of your sacrifice. And so, Lord, in this moment, we recommit our hearts to you. We say that we belong to you and you belong to us, Lord. Thank you for adopting us into your family. Thank you for making us part. Thank you for loving us when we didn't deserve it. Thank you for being good to us. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.